Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back with another Queen Charlotte of Bridgerton story. I've never been married, but I think it's safe to conclude that a honeymoon without any honey doesn't really sound that appealing to me. Charlotte is now the queen and she should be happy. She should be getting to know her husband and her new home. She should be experiencing the joy of a new relationship in a country with a new love. But that is not what's happening in this episode, because if you really think about it, she's been abandoned by not only her brother, but now her husband. So let's take our time on this and let's imagine what it would feel like to be in her shoes, how she must feel. She's in this huge mansion surrounded by staff and things, and yet she has no one to speak to. Her life seems to consist of waking up, getting dressed, or should I say her staff dressing her, because they arrive when she pulls on a string that rings a bell. And I'm talking about people who give her a bath, people who bring the jewels, people who do her hair, people who select her attire. She has what we in present day would call a full dream team. She eats alone, she goes to bed alone, and then she repeats the cycle all over again. But let's get started. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we begin. So the queen is still being treated like a life-sized Barbie at this point. She gets changed 3 times a day. She eats her meals, all while under the watchful eye of the staff. At this point, she's been there, we don't know how long, but the honeymoon is beginning. She asks Brimsley, what is in my engagement diary for the week? I assume there will be charity visits, the poor or orphans. I know I must meet with my ladies in waiting. That is important. There is so much to take in here. The art, seeing the galleries of London, and I have always loved theater and music. Are there concerts, operas in my engagement diary? Because she wants to get to doing stuff. He tells her that there is nothing planned in her engagement diary because she is on her honeymoon, which further reminds her that this is supposed to be a time where she is with her husband, where he's not there. He's nowhere to be found. While that's going on, we see the princess. According to the various advisors, Parliament is still concerned that this whole thing is going on, and they're calling it the Great Experiment. They're meeting with the king's mom, the princess, to remind her that people who look like the queen don't normally have the titles that she, or should we say the king, has given, reminding us yet again that minorities in this time did not have a lot of power. Royals are always watched, but because this is something new, they're being watched even closer. So they want to know if the new king and queen have consummated the marriage yet. But they don't want to flat out ask the princess because, number one, it's his mom, and number two, she's a woman. And how dare you speak about such things with a woman in this time period? She's such a dainty flower that, you can't crush her by talking about the reality of what happens when, 2 people are married and they sleep with one another. So she agrees that it is complicated because in her day, there were 7 people in the room to confirm that the marital act was completed. But now they need privacy. The thought of having several people in the room while doing that with my husband, and it's my first time or something like that, I couldn't imagine going through that. But apparently that was the norm back in her day. They want them to have sex and do it quickly because they have to show that this great experiment is a success. With the princess wondering if he has done the deed or not, we later see that the queen's man and the king's men are called in front of her to confirm whether or not they've done the deed. This is jumping around a little bit, but I'm just going to skip to it so we don't have to come back to it. They're very uncomfortable, and in a roundabout way, they say yes, despite knowing that it's not true, because in order to have done that, you have to actually spend time together. And at this point, the 2 of them have not spent any time together since getting married. Back to Charlotte. She's eating and all eyes are on her as usual. She looks at the other end of the table and she sees an empty chair. And as she looks at the chair, she looks sad. She changes into yet another outfit and she looks sad. She walks down the hallway and Brimsley follows her and she looks sad. She prepares to eat again while everyone is watching her. She looks sad doing that. She stares at the end of the table once again on an empty chair. And this continues, this same thing where she's looking sad. She's looking out the window. She smiles at the staff, trying to get a little bit of something, but nobody speaks for multiple days. We then see her go to the library to grab a book, and she can't even do that for herself. We later see her try to pick an orange. She can't do that either. Brimsley claps his hands and someone grabs a stepping stool and grabs the book. She then uses that book to keep her company as she eats at the table alone. The music that they use really brings out the various emotions that she's going through during this time, because it's very somber through these scenes. We see her then at one point, because she's so frustrated of being followed and not having anything uttered and being by herself, running down the hall as Brimsley trots behind her. It's driving her nuts to the point where we see her collapse on her bed as she screams. We then hear our favorite narrator, and she brings us back to current day. Patience is not always a virtue. The passage of time does not always reap benefits, and perhaps good things do not always come to those who wait. However, there are some very special joys well worth waiting for. And this is where we see Lady Bridgerton and two of her grandchildren, and they're playing and you hear laughter, and I'm assuming that these are Daphne's kids. Meanwhile, the Queen is at home holding court with her sons, trying to figure out what they got going on while she has her little dog in her lap, which I later found out, and we will in this episode, that those dogs have meaning. So she's still trying to work on them finding women who could be respectable women who will create a respectable heir, telling them that the bloodline has to continue with them. And they're fussing back and forth. One of the husbands even says that he hasn't seen his wife since the wedding day, which goes to show you it was just a formality. We hear. One wonders as England waits to see which of King George's children will bring us closer to a royal heir to their throne, if patience is a virtue or a burden for our dear Queen Charlotte. And at this point, it seems like a burden because she's stressing herself about making sure that there is some type of royal heir. So we're back in the past. It's another day. Charlotte at this point has had enough. She decides to do a pop-up. Now, I personally am not a fan of pop-ups. Don't pop up on me and I won't pop up on you. But I have to remind myself that she is popping up on her husband. So she says, Brimsley, ready the carriage. We are going to see my husband. Brimsley does it and they arrive at the queue despite not being called on. When they arrive, she is told by his man, his kingsman, that the king is in the observatory. Charlotte quickly begins to walk and tells the rest of them to stay behind. She does not want anyone following her. So both of the kingsmen, Charlotte's which is Brimsley, and Reynolds, which is the king's, are standing outside waiting. When Reynolds, the kingsman, says, Brimsley, you can come inside to my quarters to warm up. It's such a cool night. And this is when I realize how completely oblivious I am, because we end up finding out immediately once they're inside that Reynolds and Brimsley are lovers. As soon as they get in the room, the two of them immediately start kissing and taking off each other's clothes while discussing what they're going to say when they're summoned to the palace and whose fault it is that the honeymoon isn't going well, to the point where Brimsley is wondering if one of the problems is that the king is not attracted to Charlotte because she's not his type. And Reynolds is like, I don't know what his type is, but I do know the one thing that is definitely something that he's looking for is a female. Given that Charlotte is the one that is over here seeking him out, trying to visit him, I think it's safe to say that it's not on her, that it's on the king. So at this point, both men are just hoping that the conversation goes well and that it lasts for longer than 20 minutes so they can enjoy their time together, because who's to say how often this gets to happen. And I'm just going to say it now. The storyline between Brimsley and Reynolds really left a lot of unanswered questions for me. I would love to see more come out of their characters, because there's a point in one of the last episodes that had me questioning some things, but we'll talk about it when we get to it. But I would love to know more about their characters. And I feel like one thing that I love about this series is it left a lot of room for exploration for other people other than the Bridgertons. So we're in the observatory now. And the way that George approached this conversation honestly pissed me off. You are the king, and the last time you saw her, you were really rude to her and really mean, and you got in an argument with her and stormed out and refused to stay with her, leaving her alone on her wedding night. And here you are today acting like that never happened. So she storms kind of into the observatory, and she's looking around at what she sees, and she's very underwhelmed and perplexed at what she's seeing. But George is sitting there acting like it's no big deal. She's looking like, okay, so you've been hanging out in this room and you've been eating and you've been staring at the stars. And he looks like he likes her, but the way he's so dismissive of her feelings makes me feel otherwise. And I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about, because I'm going to read their conversation. So she says, George, what have I done wrong? What mistake did I make? He says, you made no mistakes. She says, did I say something? Did I do something to offend you? He laughs and he says, no, Charlotte. Then what is so wrong with me? He says, there's nothing wrong with you. She says, there must be something wrong, George. I thought you were visiting a brothel. He says, do you know what that word means? She says, I know what a brothel is, almost. I do have brothers. I'm saying that it might be better if you were visiting a brothel. I would understand it more. But no, you prefer stars to my company. He says, I did not say I prefer. She says, you have been in this room. He says, observatory, the only one of its kind in all of England. You're acting so dismissive of what she's saying, and she is obviously upset. And he's over here trying to correct her and make sure that she calls it an observatory. So she says, you have been in this one of a kind observatory room, sleeping and eating and staring at the sky and feeling excited by the consolation since the night of our wedding, while I have been stuck in that stuffy house being changed like a doll 3 times a day with nowhere to go, no one to talk to, and nothing to do. He says, you are the queen. You can do whatever you like. She says, except spend time with my husband, because she wants to spend time with him. But for whatever reason, he doesn't want to spend time with her. We'll get to it. He says, I do not understand what you complain about. And you hear the music. She says, I am 7 and 10 years old. She's only 17. And suddenly I am queen in a strange country with strange food and strange customs. You do not understand, because this is who you were born to be. I cannot do whatever I like. The queen is not allowed to go to the modiste or the galleries or the eye shops. I cannot make friends. I must hold myself apart. I do not know a single soul here except you. I'm completely alone, and you prefer the sky to me? The look in his face when she's saying it says that it's not true, says that there's something there, but of course he doesn't say it. Instead, he does what he normally does, which is he shuts down. She says, George. He says, what? She says, say something. He says, I do not want to fight with you. She says, I want to fight with you. Fight with me. Fight for me. He tells her, go home, Charlotte. Which probably had to be yet another crush to her, because here she is making herself vulnerable, telling this man that she wants to spend time with him, and yet again he doesn't want to. So it's another day, and we see Lady Danbury being subjected to yet yet again to her much older husband. The bed is squeaking, her head is hitting the headboard, and she once again looks like she cannot wait for it to be over. After it's done, we get to hear Lady Danbury complain. She says, mornings, evenings, middle of the nights, and now tea time. I was having tea, Carol. She's talking to her lady's maid. She's over having so much relations with him. She don't want to do it. She explains that he went to the Gentlemen's Club at Mayfair, and as a titled member of the town, he currently has the right to entry, but they refuse to allow him in, which is because he's brown. Normally, brown people aren't in there. Her maid explains, the same thing happened to Lord Smith and the Kents. Lord Danbury is determined to be accepted, Lady Danbury says. He's been giving a taste and now he will not be denied. He's going to try the Hunt Club tomorrow. Cora tells her, look, I'm sorry, but he's going to take out his frustrations on you. So basically, I'll make sure that the hot water for your bath is ready by making sure that the water is on the fire whenever you need it. All you have to do is call for me. She says, I believe I shall also need a slave for my inner thighs. Oh dear, what if he puts another one of his gigantic babies inside of me? The scene was meant to show the times and to also add a little bit of humor. But the thought of her not having a say-so over what happened with her body, the thought of her not wanting to sleep with him, the thought of her who called these babies gigantic also made me look a little bit at Lady Danbury, because saying another one of his gigantic babies then let us know that she had multiple children, which we later learned was 4, meaning that she had kids that we did not know about in season 1. So the Kingsmen meet up. Brimsley suggests to Reynolds that the king do something nice for the queen. She's in the garden where she can't even pick an orange, as I said earlier, and it is announced that the king has a gift and a note for her. The note says, I never want you to feel alone, George. And she smiles. It's obvious that she cares for him. So George sends Charlotte what he's deeming as a gesture, of love and care. And it's a puppy, but she's not a fan. She calls it a deformed bunny. She dislikes it even more as she's sitting down at the table eating, and it's sitting across from her, which is very ironic that of all places you put this thing in the basket on the table, but they put it in front of the chair where it's conveniently positioned where the king should be sitting, which is another way to rub it in that she's by herself. So after eating alone for the umpteenth time, she requests to Brimsley that she starts meeting her ladies in waiting. And he knows that if she did that, it would destroy things. He's like, look, you can't do that. You're still on your honeymoon. If you do this, you have to do it with somebody who's going to be very discreet. Only have one of them over. And she's like, well, what do you think about Lady Danbury? And Brimsley basically gives her the look of approval. He knows that Lady Danbury is excited and he also likes her. So it's the next day and Lady Danbury is there for tea. And as she's sitting there having small talk with Charlotte, it's clear that she sees right through her. Charlotte unconvincingly speaks about how wonderful her honeymoon has been. And Lady Danbury at some point looks at her and says, can I speak freely? So Charlotte is like, sure you can. She tells everybody to leave the room. And she says, please speak freely because no one else does. And Lady Danbury doesn't waste any time to do just that. She says, first of all, you are a terrible liar. I did not believe a word that you said about your honeymoon. Do not try that in front of society. She tells her queen that her wedding night was awful too, because her husband, Lord Danbury, was old and he was impatient. And at this point, Charlotte begins ranting, talking about how George was mean and how he was hurtful and how he just wanted to leave and how he's at Q while she's there and how he gave her that fake little dog to make up for it. And as she's ranting, Lady Danbury is realizing that there may be a problem here. Lady Danbury says, you did consummate the marriage, did you not? Because if you did not consummate, then you are not married. And if you are not married to the king, then your position is in danger, which means everyone else's position is in danger as well. You hear Lady Danbury take a deep breath as she's asked for charcoal and paper. So she's doing drawings for Charlotte to understand what's going on. And it's clear that Charlotte doesn't know very much, but neither does Lady Danbury. There's a lot that she doesn't know also, because Lady Danbury admittedly has not enjoyed relations. Charlotte asks, how many times, as they're looking at the pictures that she drew up, does he insert it? How long does it take? Will I enjoy it? And Lady Danbury says, sometimes it feels like it takes forever. I personally have never enjoyed it. I feel like it's more of a chore, but I don't like him. Maybe, it will be different for you. Which explains why in present day, Lady Danbury is happy that she's by herself, because she spent years with someone that she did not love and doing things that she did not want to do. Charlotte says, I do not like George, so I do not see why we should need to bother ourselves to do all of this. You hear Lady Danbury like, Your Majesty, this is Britain. It was not that long ago that queens were beheaded for not bearing children. That is not going to happen, Your Majesty, but this is important. You are the first of your kind. You must secure your position. She's like, but it's not my failing. I mean, he clearly doesn't want me, and I cannot somehow force him to want to do this with me. And maybe that it's a good thing if I'm not queen, if we are not married, then maybe we can forget all about this and I could go home. And Lady Danbury is looking like, if this girl doesn't get it together for us, she has to get it together for us. And she looks at her and she says, it's a Pomeranian. Your deformed bunny, it's a dog. It's a very rare and purebred Pomeranian. I can't tell if Charlotte doesn't get that this great experiment isn't just about her because they don't have this race problem in her country, or if it's an age thing, like if she just doesn't know because of her age, but we'll see. So we flash the current day where Lady Danbury, the Queen, and Lady Bridgerton are speaking. She basically called Lady Bridgerton to get some help because she's trying to figure out how Lady Bridgerton, with her 8 kids, not only had marriages in both seasons, but her daughter has been able to have children and she's a grandma. Lady Violet says, I think it helps if they're in love. And she's like, love? So the Queen says, I'm going to speak plainly because we are all mature women here. My boys are in love. They are in love with commoners. They are in love with Catholics. And they are in love with actresses. And they are in love with women who are already married. Love is not the issue. Love has produced over 50 illegitimate babies for the crown. The fact that she's sitting here and she's saying this, like, my sons have kids. They're not legitimate because they're not, into the royal family or whatever, but we have kids. That whole thing is odd to me. They're your sons, they're heirs. So I would think that they would be, legitimate, but no, it doesn't work that way when it comes to royalty, which is why, I'm going to stay in my little lane. So Lady Bridgerton realizes that her answer isn't going to work. So she says, ask Lady Danbury. She had, many children. Maybe she can help. And this is where we are told that Lady Danbury had 4 kids. And she says they all live many continents away. Marriage, in my opinion, is a duty, not a pleasure. It can be a painful, lifelong sentence. And she chuckles. And you can tell that Lady Bridgerton is a little bit uncomfortable because marriage was something different for her. She says it offers so much. It's companionship and tradition and family and warmth. And if you take time to become close, a match doesn't have to start out as love, but it can grow. And love can bloom from the thorniest of gardens, can it not? And you can tell that, they're a little apprehensive about it. But the Queen is like, look, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit of your advice, but I'm going to play matchmaker in hopes that it grows to love. So back to the back to the past. The Kingsmen are fussing because Brimsley allowed someone to visit the Queen, which we know is Lady D. He knows that this is going to get back to the palace because of the servants. And Brimsley is like, okay, if it gets back, it gets back. But tell me what's wrong with your man. What's keeping him from her? At the palace, we see Princess his mom, George's mom, trying to find if her son and his wife have consummated their marriage. She has found out that Lady Danbury has been to the house, so she summoned her to come. Lord Danbury is like, why do they want to talk to you and not me? And she, comforts him and pads his ego by saying, I don't know, hun, but when I find out, I will let you know. So she arrives to talk to the princess. And this is where we get to see who Lady Danbury truly is. A lot of this conversation, minus the racial undertones, reminds me of what we see in present day when the queen speaks to people. So it's a bit of a dance. So you hear the guy that's always in the room questioning the princess say, what did you speak to her majesty about? Lady Danbury says, does it signify what two ladies discuss at tea? Tea is often about gowns and flower arrangements and embroidery and social season gossip. He says, I do not think the girl knows. The princess says, she knows. Agatha, we know what tea is generally about. What was this tea about, girl? I said, girl. Lady Danbury said, this tea? She says, you are being purposely obstructive, Agatha, and I will not have it. Lady Danbury says, Lady Danbury. The princess says, excuse me? She said, Lady Danbury. That is my title, Your Highness. The one you were kind enough to bestow upon me. Lady Agatha Danbury. And I do remember one thing about this tea. It was when I understood our new queen had not yet realized that our titles are shiny and new. Is that not an interesting topic for an upcoming tea? And I saw, Lady Danbury is not playing. Lady Danbury has told us in recent seasons, understanding that you're playing chess. And as someone who plays chess, not me, Lady Danbury, you got to be careful about your moves. This is Lady Danbury showing us that she's playing chess, okay? She's letting her know that I'm on to you. I understand what you did. The others may not see it, but I see it. The princess says, perhaps we should speak in a womanly way. She asks the guy to leave. He leaves after some apprehension. She says, you surprise me. I always thought you were a quiet one. Lady Danbury says, I'm not quiet. It's simply that my husband is loud. Princess says, Lady Danbury, I need to know what is going on at Buckingham House. I need a trusted heir. Do you understand? She says, I do. Traditionally, when a title is bestowed, it comes with income and land and estate. Without those things, a title is simply a title. We all have needs, ma'am. What Lady Danbury needs is for these titles to actually mean something, not just to cover up what they're deeming as their mistake in the great experiment. The princess says, you want money. Lady Danbury says, you forget that the reason your father-in-law, the king, knew my family is because my father-in-law is also a king. And Sierra Leone is very rich. Meaning, you trying to act like you all of that, but you're not the only person whose father-in-law is a king. I come from royalty too, boo. She says, we already have money. We have more money than most of the town. What I need is for my husband to not be denied entry into White's. I need my husband to be invited on hunts. I need to cross the street to the best modiste, to take the finest seats at the opera. And the princess is hearing that and she's like, that is grasping, asking for rather a lot. You should be grateful. And Lady Danbury says, you said you need to know what is going on over at Buckingham House. I assume the reason you need that is so that Lord Bute believes you have the situation handled, because if you do not, the House of Lords will be at your door. Is that not a fact? And Agatha, I think that not Agatha, because Agatha is Lady Danbury, Princess is realizing here that she got to get it together because Lady Danbury is on to her. She says, once again, careful, Lady Danbury. She says, I am merely pointing out you need to know what's going on over at Buckingham Palace. We need to be equal members of the town. We can be grateful to one another. Understand that Lady Danbury in this instance is showing why she has so much power. Number one, she comes from royalty. Number two, she was already rich before she came over there. Number three, she is changing the trajectory of people who look like her. She is. Because you were giving a title and she's demanding that they get more than just the title. She's demanding that they get what comes along with it, which it just isn't money and land, but it's rights and it's respect. Go Lady D. So we see Charlotte in the past walking to yet another meal, dressed in yet another over-the-top outfit, and she stops when she notices that at the other end of the table is George. He tells her he's joined her for a meal this evening, and he says it like it's nothing. She says, a meal? A meal? A meal? And she walks off. And he's looking shocked that she walks off, and he's like, stop. And of course, because he's her king, she stops. He asks for one evening of her time to show her where his mind has been. It might not make you forgive me, but it might make you hate me a bit less. Next thing you know, where he is all the time is the observatory, looking at the stars and the planets, and he shows her Venus, the planet of love. He confesses that looking at the universe keeps him humble. He said, in this world we live in, where I am given so much power and attention, it is good to remember I'm a bit of dust. I'm a small dot in the universe. It keeps one humble. Being king is a hazard. My world has been made to revolve around me, and it has made me selfish. He then apologizes for ruining her wedding night. She says she doesn't forgive him yet. And when he hears the word yet, you can tell that there's hope, and you can see a little change up in his demeanor as well as hers. He tells her that they can redo the wedding night, and they kiss. And she is just a cloud of, a puddle of, what's the word? I don't even know what I'm trying to say. She's soft at this point. She's just, a bed of clouds, light and fluffy. And she's excited. And she says, does this mean that you're coming home to Buckingham House? And he hesitates for a little moment and he agrees. And when I first watched it, something about that hesitation made me nervous. But then I saw her smile and his smile and I let it go. We see them load up the carriage with his things. We see the different things that they have being carried into the palace, and the two of them walking the hallway while they're smiling and talking with their kingsmen following behind them. They separate to prepare for the night, and as Charlotte is getting ready, she looks gorgeous. She's so beautiful. She enters his bedroom while the two men are standing outside. He tells her she's beautiful. She lets him know that she's nervous about the outfit of choice because it has a lot of buttons, and he says, I am very good with buttons. One thing about the series is whoever the sex coach is, and I've said this before, pays attention to all the little details and nuances, because it's the nervous way that they look at each other. It's the way he caresses her face. It's the differences in their breathing and the way they kiss and the way they hold one another. It's so beautiful. We have the music playing lightly in the background as the fireplace is lit and the dim light flashes over them, and you can't help but feel the love. He then says to her, do you know what happens on our wedding night? And she says, yes, I know everything. I've seen drawings and had a detailed explanation as to what is to occur. He says, well, that's good to know. And he laughs. She says, I do not like the part where my head hits the wall over and over and over again. Is there a way to avoid that? He says, yes, there's a way to avoid that. And as they get started, you can see how he's looking at her. And as he's about to enter her, he looks at her and there's reassurance there that it's okay to proceed. This is not like what Lady Danbury described, because the two of them are enjoying themselves. We also later see the Kingsmen in bed, and they look like they just finished doing what they were doing, enjoying themselves as well. At the end of the night, next morning, Charlotte wakes up and she's happy. And I'm happy that she's happy. And we see Lady Danbury and Lord Danbury arrive at their new home. He says, the paper says that it's ours. This, the land. Spots at Eton for the boys. And apparently there are cattle somewhere. There is a key. He laughs. Lady Danbury says, He says, I never thought that I would see this day. Do you know how this happened? She says, I have no idea. He says, I will tell you how this happened. The king sees me for who I am, my value, my worth. He understands that the old days are over. And that this is a new world, that men are men regardless of whence they came. He's proud of himself. But this has nothing to do with him. This has everything to do with two women. These men are taking credit for what two women have done. The princess, the king's mother, and Lady Danbury. Goes to show you the power that women have, right? So we're back to the palace. Everything is great, but it doesn't last long because Charlotte is ready to have breakfast with her man. But her man has a visitor, his mama. So Charlotte overhears George talking to his mother, who can no longer wait for the palace to confirm whether or not they consummated their marriage. She needs details. And Charlotte hears the worst thing that she could hear him say. He says, "You told me I had to wed for the crown. I did. You told me to charm her to make it easier for the crown. I have done my best. You told me I could not let her know me because I must protect the secrets of the crown. I have not. You told me to bed her. I have done so. I understand. It has been abundantly clear since my first breath that I was born for the happiness or misery of a great nation, and consequently must often act contrary to my passions. I am the picture of duty. The crown resides within me, embedded like a knife. You don't need to explain it to me, mother. It's me." And he's shouting. The burden that he carries is too great. And I think that burden has added to the issues that he has later in life. As this is going on, and Charlotte has overheard this, tears fill her eyes, and she walks off telling Brimsley she will no longer wait for the king. She's going to have breakfast by herself because she's hurt. We then cut to what is present day, and the queen is still eating by herself, alone. And as she's sitting there, I can't help but realize how much she sacrificed, not just as her duty to her country, but her duty to Great Britain and this love that she has for this imperfect man. Back to the past. The princess has left. King George asks Reynolds if she's gone. He says yes. The next thing you know, we see the king collapse in a chair. Reynolds seems concerned, but he does not seem shocked at this collapse. He offers to send for the doctor, and he says, yes, get him. But Charlotte, and he looks at him and says, she will never know, and he walks out. And I said, oh, this isn't good. You all, tell me what you thought of this one. I know I gave a little bit more detail here, but I wanted to make sure that you all get this. Seeing that she once disliked those dogs and now she loves them shows her love for her king. Seeing how she went from despising him to wanting him to having him to now being hurt by him. I'm interested, even though I already know, but I'm interested in what you all think of this and what's to come. Until next time.